The parrot squawked 3 words that made Victoria Marlowe freeze on the dusty platform of Council Bluffs, Iowa. And those words were the exact ones her dying mother had whispered 6 months earlier in Boston. Trust your heart. Victoria clutched the cage tighter as passengers jostled past her in the July heat of 1872, and she searched the crowd for the man whose letters had promised her a new life. A man she had never seen but whose words on paper had given her hope when everything else had crumbled to ash. The train station smelled of coal smoke and horse dung, and Victoria's dark hair stuck to her neck beneath her modest traveling bonnet. She wore her best dress, a simple navy cotton that had seen better days, and her only pair of good boots pinched her feet after 3 days of travel. The green parrot in the brass cage tilted its head and studied her with one black eye, then the other, a gesture so reminiscent of her mother that Victoria's throat tightened. "Miss Hastings." A deep voice cut through the noise, and Victoria turned to see a tall man approaching, his hat in his hands. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water in winter. His brown hair needed cutting, and dust covered his boots and the hem of his denim trousers, but something in his expression was honest and open in a way that made her shoulders relax just slightly. "Yes," Victoria said, setting down her worn carpetbag, but keeping hold of the parrot cage. "You must be Mr. Marlowe." "Vincent Marlowe, yes, madam." He looked at the cage, then back at her face, and she saw curiosity there but no judgment. "I apologize for my appearance. Had some trouble with a fence line this morning and didn't have time to change properly." "Trust your heart," the parrot said clearly, and Vincent's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a bird you have there." He reached for her carpetbag, and Victoria noticed the calluses on his hands, the strong forearms visible where his sleeves were rolled up. Working hands, honest hands, she hoped. "His name is Pascal," Victoria said, her voice catching slightly. "He was my mother's. She passed 6 months ago, and he knows her voice, her words. I could not leave him behind." Vincent studied her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "I would not ask you to leave behind something that carries your mother's memory. My own mother died when I was 12. I still have her Bible, and I read it most nights." The simple honesty of his words made Victoria's eyes sting, and she blinked rapidly. She had prepared herself for many possibilities in this arrangement, this marriage to a stranger across half the continent, but she had not prepared for kindness. The men who had circled around her father's debts in Boston had not been kind. The landlord who had evicted her from the only home she had ever known had not been kind. But this cowboy, this stranger, was looking at her as if she mattered. "Come," Vincent said, gesturing toward the street where a wagon waited, its bed filled with supplies. "It is a 2-hour ride to the ranch, and we should get started before the heat gets worse. Are you hungry?" "Thirsty. I could use some water," Victoria admitted, and Vincent immediately pulled a canteen from the wagon and handed it to her. The water was cool and sweet, and she drank gratefully while he loaded her bag into the wagon bed alongside sacks of grain and coils of rope. He helped her onto the wagon seat with careful hands, making sure she was settled before placing Pascal's cage between them where it would not slide around during the journey. The parrot ruffled its emerald feathers and made a soft clicking sound with its beak, a sound of contentment that Victoria remembered from childhood mornings when her mother would uncover the cage and greet Pascal with soft words. Vincent climbed up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue to set the 2 horses moving. Council Bluffs spread out around them, a bustling river town perched on the eastern bank of the Missouri River. Victoria had read that it was a major outfitting point for travelers heading west, and she could see the evidence in the crowded streets, the shops selling everything from wagon wheels to mining equipment. The town has grown considerably in the past few years, Vincent said as they navigated around a freight wagon. When I first came here in '68, it was half this size. The railroad changed everything. How long have you had your ranch? Victoria asked, studying his profile as he drove. He had a strong jaw and a straight nose, and there was something steady about him that made her feel less like she was tumbling into an abyss. 4 years now. I started with just a quarter section, 160 acres, but I have been able to buy 2 more quarter sections from neighbors who wanted to move on. The land is good for cattle, with plenty of grass and 3 creeks running through the property. He glanced at her, and she saw uncertainty flicker across his face. I know it is not what you are accustomed to, coming from Boston. The house is small, just 3 rooms, but it is solid and the roof does not leak. Mr. Marlowe, Victoria said quietly, I am not accustomed to much of anything anymore. My father died 18 months ago, and he left nothing but debts. I sold everything we had to pay what I could, and I have spent the last year working as a seamstress in a boarding house, sleeping in a room not much bigger than a closet. A house with 3 rooms and a roof that does not leak sounds like a palace. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she met his gaze steadily. She had nothing to hide, no false pretenses to maintain. She was exactly what his advertisement had requested. A woman of good character seeking a fresh start, willing to work hard, wanting a family. That she was doing it out of desperation rather than adventure did not change the fundamental truth. I appreciate your honesty, Vincent said, returning his attention to the road as they left the main part of town behind. I will be honest in return. I am not a rich man, and ranching is hard work with no guarantees. I have had good years and bad years, and I cannot promise you ease or luxury. But I can promise you respect, a roof over your head and food on the table. And I will never raise my hand to you in anger. Never let fear guide you, child, Pascal said suddenly, and both of them startled. Victoria felt her cheeks flush. My mother used to say that, she explained. She was a teacher before she married my father, and she had very firm ideas about courage and integrity. Pascal learned dozens of her phrases over the years. She sounds like she was a wise woman. Vincent smiled, and the expression transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. My mother used to say that character is what you do when nobody is watching. She would have liked your mother, I think. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, leaving the scattered houses of Council Bluffs behind and entering open prairie. The land rolled gently, covered in tall grass that whispered in the hot breeze. Wildflowers dotted the landscape in splashes of yellow and purple, and overhead, the sky stretched endlessly blue and vast in a way that made Victoria feel very small and very new. It is beautiful, she said softly, and Vincent looked pleased. I think so too. Some people find it too empty, too lonely, but I have always liked the space, the quiet. You can hear yourself think out here. He pointed to a line of trees in the distance. That is the Missouri River, and beyond it is Nebraska territory. We are only about 5 miles from the river, so we never lack for water. Do you run cattle all the way to the river? Some of it. I have about 200 head right now, spread out across the grassland. In the fall, I drive them to market in Omaha, just across the river. It is a good market, and the price has been fair the last few years. He adjusted his grip on the reins. I also keep chickens, a milk cow, and a large garden. Or rather, I have tried to keep a garden. I am better with cattle than vegetables. Victoria found herself smiling. I kept the garden at our house in Boston. I enjoy it, the rhythm of planting and tending and harvesting. It would be good to have dirt under my fingernails again. Then the garden is yours, Vincent said immediately. "I will build you whatever you need, cold frames or trellises or anything else. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, has been bringing me vegetables out of pity, I think. She is from China, came here with her husband to work on the railroad. He died 3 years ago, but she stayed and started a small farm. She knows everything about growing food." They talked easily as the miles passed, sharing small details about their lives. Victoria learned that Vincent had grown up in Ohio, the youngest of 4 children, and had come west after his father died, wanting to build something of his own. He had worked as a ranch hand for 3 years before buying his own land, and he spoke of cattle and grass and water with the passion some men reserved for gold or glory. In turn, Victoria told him about her childhood in Boston, about her mother's love of books and learning, about her father's gentle nature and poor business sense. She did not tell him everything, not yet, not about the men who had come demanding payment, or the landlord who had looked at her with calculating eyes and made suggestions that had sent her running to the mail-order bride agency. Some stories needed more trust before they could be shared. "Look smart, girl," Pascal announced, another of her mother's phrases, and Vincent laughed. "Does he say anything else?" he asked, and Victoria felt warmth spread through her chest at the genuine interest in his voice. "Dozens of things, some of them quite embarrassing in the wrong company. My mother had very strong opinions about politics and women's suffrage, and Pascal learned to repeat her speeches." Victoria stroked one finger along the parrot's chest through the cage bars. "When I was packing to leave Boston, I considered selling him. The ticket for his passage was expensive, and I did not know how you would react to him. But when I opened my mouth to ask the pet shop owner for a price, I could not do it. He is all I have left of her voice, her spirit." Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough. "I am glad you brought him. A house should have life in it, voices and laughter. It has been too quiet since I built it." The sun was high overhead when they turned onto a rutted track that led away from the main road. Ahead, Victoria could see a small house set on a gentle rise, with a barn and several outbuildings nearby. It was simple, built of wood that had weathered to silver gray, but it looked solid and well-maintained. A covered porch ran along the front, and someone had planted rose bushes on either side of the steps, though they looked thirsty in the summer heat. "The roses were here when I bought the land," Vincent said, following her gaze. "The previous owner's wife planted them. I have tried to keep them alive, but I am afraid I do not have much skill with ornamental plants. They need deep watering, not frequent shallow watering," Victoria said, studying the drooping leaves, "and mulch around the roots to keep the moisture in. I can help them recover." Vincent pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and set the brake. Before Victoria could gather her skirts to climb down, he had come around to her side and was offering his hand. His palm was warm and rough against hers, and she was suddenly, acutely aware that she was about to enter this man's house, that they were to be married within days if not hours, that her entire life had led to this moment of stepping down into the dusty yard of an Iowa ranch. "Welcome home," Vincent said simply, and Victoria felt something crack open in her chest, some hard shell of protection she had built around her heart during the awful months in Boston. "Thank you," she whispered, and meant it more than he could possibly know. Vincent carried Pascal's cage in one hand and Victoria's carpetbag in the other, leading her up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, and it took Victoria's eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, she found herself in a main room that served as both kitchen and living area. A cast iron stove dominated one wall, with a simple wooden table and 2 chairs nearby. A rocking chair sat near the front window, and shelves lined another wall, holding dishes, books, and various necessities. 2 doors led off the main room, and Vincent gestured to them. The bedroom is there, and I built a small second room last year that I have been using for storage. You can have the bedroom, and I will sleep in the main room until we are properly married. Victoria felt her cheeks warm. They had not discussed the details of their arrangement, and she appreciated his discretion. When were you planning for the ceremony? I spoke with the minister in town, Reverend Thompson. He said he could perform the service any time we wished, with 2 witnesses present. I thought perhaps we might wait a few days, give you time to settle in and be certain. Vincent set Pascal's cage on the table and placed her carpet bag beside it. I know this is all sudden and strange. I do not want you to feel pressured. Trust your heart, Pascal said, and Victoria found herself smiling despite her nervousness. My mother would say that we should not wait if we have already made our decision, she said. Delay only breeds doubt, she used to tell me. And I have made my decision, Mr. Marlowe. I came here to marry you and build a life with you. Waiting will not change that. Vincent looked at her with an expression she could not quite read, something between gratitude and wonder. Then we will go to town tomorrow and speak with the Reverend. But for today, you should rest and settle in. The journey must have been exhausting. He showed her the bedroom, a simple space with a brass bed covered in a faded quilt, a dresser with a cracked mirror and a washstand. The window looked out over the prairie, and Victoria could see cattle grazing in the distance, dark shapes against the golden grass. It is not much, Vincent said, standing in the doorway, but you can change anything you like. I am not particular about furnishings. It is perfect, Victoria said honestly. After the tiny room in the boarding house, with its single narrow cot and the constant smell of cabbage from the kitchen below, this felt spacious and peaceful. Truly. Vincent nodded, looking relieved. I will bring in some water so you can wash up, and then I will make us something to eat. Nothing fancy, I am afraid. My cooking skills are limited to beans, bacon, and coffee. I can cook, Victoria offered. If you show me where everything is, I can prepare supper. You have been traveling for days. Let me take care of this one meal, and tomorrow you can take over the kitchen if you wish. He smiled. Besides, I want you to see exactly how bad my cooking is, so you will be properly impressed when you improve upon it. After he left to fetch water, Victoria sank down on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment of simple feeling. She was here. She had done it. She had left behind everything familiar and traveled across half the country to marry a stranger, and so far, that stranger had been nothing but kind. It seemed too good to be true, and years of hard lessons made her wary of things that seemed too good. But her mother's voice echoed in her mind, carried by Pascal's words, "Trust your heart." And her heart, battered and cautious as it was, told her that Vincent Marlowe was exactly what he appeared to be, an honest man doing his best in a hard world. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her hairbrush, her mother's Bible, and a small daguerreotype of her parents on the dresser. It took less than 10 minutes to settle everything she owned, and the sight of her meager possessions spread out in the room was both sobering and liberating. She had so little to lose now, which meant she also had everything to gain. Vincent had prepared a simple meal of fried bacon, beans, and cornbread that was only slightly burned on the bottom. They ate at the table with Pascal's cage between them, and the parrot entertained them by demanding seeds, please, in Victoria's mother's precise Boston accent, until Victoria shared some of her cornbread. Tell me about the other ranchers nearby, Victoria said, curious about the community she was joining. You mentioned Mrs. Chen. She is about 3 miles west with a small farm, maybe 40 acres. She grows vegetables and sells them in town, and she raises ducks. Very good with ducks, Mrs. Chen. Vincent poured coffee for both of them. To the north is the Patterson Ranch, about 800 acres. Thomas Patterson and his sons run cattle, and we help each other during branding and roundup. Good people, though Thomas can be stubborn as a mule when he gets an idea in his head. And to the south and east. South is open range for about 10 miles, then the Morrison place. John Morrison and his wife have 5 children, all boys, and they are slowly going crazy from the noise, I think. Vincent grinned. And to the east is town, as you know. There are other ranches scattered around, maybe 15 families within a 10-mile radius. It is not crowded, but it is not completely isolated either. Victoria felt some of her tension ease. She had worried about being completely alone, cut off from other women and the rhythms of community life. Are there social gatherings, church services? Church every Sunday in town when the circuit preacher comes through. That is about twice a month. And there are barn dances, quilting circles, harvest celebrations. The women meet regularly, and I know they will be eager to welcome you. He paused, his expression turning serious. I should warn you that some people will be curious, perhaps judgmental about our arrangement. Mail-order marriages are not uncommon out here, but there are always those who like to gossip. Let them talk, Victoria said firmly. I have learned that people will always find something to criticize. The only opinions that matter are our own and God's. Look smart, girl, Pascal agreed, and Vincent laughed. They cleaned up the supper dishes together, working side by side at the wash basin, and Victoria was struck by how natural it felt, this simple domestic rhythm. Vincent washed while she dried, and he showed her where everything belonged, apologizing for the lack of organization. I have never been good at keeping house, he admitted. Things tend to pile up until I cannot find anything, and then I spend a day sorting it all out, only to have it pile up again within a week. Then it is fortunate you have acquired a wife with organizational skills, Victoria said. And the word wife felt strange in her mouth, both foreign and inevitable. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber, Vincent showed her how to bank the stove for the night and where he kept the lanterns and matches. He set up a bedroll on the floor near the front door, insisting he would be comfortable there, and Victoria did not argue. She was exhausted from travel and emotion, and the thought of her own room, her own space to breathe and think, was deeply appealing. Sleep well, Vincent said as she took Pascal's cage into the bedroom. If you need anything during the night, just call out. Good night, Mr. Marlowe, Victoria said softly. And thank you for everything, Vincent, he said. You can call me Vincent. We are to be married tomorrow after all. Vincent, she repeated, testing the name. Then you should call me Rebecca. My mother was the only one who called me that, but I think I would like to hear it again. He smiled, and in the lamplight his eyes were warm. Rebecca, it suits you. Good night, Rebecca. In the privacy of the bedroom, Victoria changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, brushing out her long dark hair and feeling the weight of the day settle over her. Pascal dozed in his cage, covered with an old cloth, and outside the window, crickets sang in the darkness. She thought about Vincent Marlowe, about the way he had looked at her parrot with curiosity instead of annoyance, about his calloused hands and honest eyes. She thought about his promise never to raise his hand to her in anger, and how that simple promise had meant more than he could know. She had seen too many women in Boston with bruises hidden beneath their sleeves, had heard too many excuses and justifications. I think you would like him, Mama, she whispered into the darkness. I think you would say he has good character. In the morning, Victoria woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and the smell of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly in her better dress, the dark green cotton she had saved for the wedding, and arranged her hair as neatly as she could without the luxury of a hot iron for curling. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Vincent at the stove, looking harried as he tried to manage eggs in a pan. "I was trying to make breakfast," he said ruefully, "but I think I have made a mess instead." Victoria laughed and took over, rescuing the eggs before they burned completely and producing a respectable breakfast of eggs, bacon, and toasted bread. They ate quickly, both aware of the significant errand ahead of them, and then Vincent hitched up the wagon again for the journey back to Council Bluffs. The morning air was cooler, fresher, and Victoria felt her spirits lift as they drove toward town. She had changed her entire life on faith and hope, and today she would bind herself legally and spiritually to a man she had known for less than 24 hours. It should have been terrifying, but instead she felt calm, centered in a way she had not felt since her mother's death. "Are you nervous?" Vincent asked as they approached the outskirts of town. "Surprisingly, no," Rebecca admitted. "Are you terrified?" he said honestly, and then laughed at her startled expression. "I have never been married before. I have no idea if I will be any good at it. But I promise to try my best." "That is all either of us can promise," Rebecca said, and reached over to briefly touch his arm. "We will figure it out together." Reverend Thompson was a kindly man in his 50s who asked them only the most basic questions before agreeing to perform the ceremony. Vincent had arranged for the witnesses in advance. Mrs. Chen, who arrived in a practical wagon dress with mud on her boots and a warm smile on her weathered face, and Thomas Patterson, a burly rancher with gray in his beard and laugh lines around his eyes. "So you are the brave woman who agreed to marry this stubborn fool," Patterson said, shaking Rebecca's hand with enthusiasm. "Welcome to Iowa, Mrs. Marlowe, or soon to be Mrs. Marlowe, I suppose." "Thank you," Rebecca said, charmed by his bluff kindness. Mrs. Chen was more reserved but no less welcoming. "You need anything, you come see me," she said in accented English. "I show you good places for mushrooms, which plants are food, which are poison, important things to know." The ceremony itself was brief and simple, conducted in the Reverend's small office with sunlight streaming through the window. Rebecca had no ring to give Vincent, and he had no ring to give her, but when the Reverend asked if they promised to love, honor, and cherish each other, they both said, "I do," with voices that only trembled slightly. "Then by the power vested in me by the state of Iowa and Almighty God, I pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thompson said. "Vincent, you may kiss your bride." Vincent looked at Rebecca with a question in his eyes, and she nodded slightly, giving permission. He leaned in and kissed her softly, barely a brush of lips, but Rebecca felt the touch all the way to her toes. It was her first kiss, and it tasted like coffee and new beginnings. Patterson insisted on buying them a wedding dinner at the hotel restaurant, and they sat around a table eating roast beef and potatoes while Mrs. Chen told stories about the early days of Council Bluffs, and Patterson complained good-naturedly about the weather, the cattle market, and his son's various misadventures. "You have good man," Mrs. Chen said to Rebecca when the men were distracted by a discussion of fence repairs. "He helped me fix wagon last year, no charge. He bring me firewood in winter. Good heart." "I am beginning to see that," Rebecca said softly, watching Vincent laugh at something Patterson had said. He looked younger when he laughed, less burdened by the weight of running a ranch alone. They returned to the ranch in the late afternoon, and Rebecca felt a shift in the air between them, a new awareness. They were married now, bound together before God and the law. The small house was no longer Vincent's house, where Rebecca was a guest. It was their house, their home, their shared life beginning. Vincent seemed to feel it too, because he was quieter than usual as he unhitched the horses and led them to the barn. Rebecca took the opportunity to explore the property more thoroughly, walking out to inspect the garden plot, which was indeed in sorry shape. The soil was good, but weeks of neglect had allowed the weeds to take over, and the few struggling vegetables looked parched and defeated. She could fix this. She could bring life and order to this patch of ground, could coax food from the earth the way her mother had taught her. The thought was deeply satisfying, a sense of purpose and usefulness that she had been missing. When Vincent returned from the barn, he found her standing in the garden with dirt on her hands and determination in her eyes. "Can you help me carry water?" she asked. "These plants need deep soaking, and the roses too. And tomorrow, I want to start clearing the weeds." "Tomorrow is Sunday," Vincent reminded her gently. "We should rest and attend church if you wish. But Monday, I will help you with whatever you need. We can make this garden into something beautiful." Sunday dawned clear and hot, and they rode to town in their best clothes, Rebecca in her green dress and Vincent in a suit that looked slightly too tight in the shoulders, as if he had gained muscle since he last wore it. They attended the service in the small white church on Main Street, and Rebecca felt the curious stares of the congregation, heard the whispers as people noticed the new Mrs. Marlowe. After the service, a dozen women surrounded her, all talking at once, asking questions and offering advice and inviting her to quilting circles and social teas. It was overwhelming but also warming, this immediate inclusion into the community of women who understood the challenges of frontier life. One woman in particular stood out, a tall blonde woman about Rebecca's age who introduced herself as Sarah Morrison, wife of John Morrison and mother to the 5 boys Vincent had mentioned. "You must come visit soon," Sarah said warmly. "I am desperate for adult female conversation. I love my sons, but there are only so many discussions about fishing and frogs that a woman can endure." "I would like that very much," Rebecca said, and meant it. Sarah had kind eyes and a ready smile, and Rebecca thought they might become real friends. The following weeks fell into a pattern that was both exhausting and satisfying. Rebecca threw herself into the work of making the ranch into a home, rising early to help Vincent with the morning chores before turning her attention to the house and garden. She cleaned every surface, organized every shelf, and made curtains for the windows from flour sacks she bleached and hemmed. She attacked the garden with determination, pulling weeds and amending soil and coaxing the struggling plants back to health. Vincent worked from dawn to dusk on ranch business, mending fences and tending cattle and cutting hay for winter feed. But he always made time to help Rebecca with the heavy work, hauling water and building her a proper chicken coop, and constructing raised beds for her herbs. They were polite to each other, careful, dancing around the reality of their sleeping arrangements. Vincent continued to sleep on his bedroll in the main room, and Rebecca had the bedroom to herself. They did not speak of it, this unfinished aspect of their marriage, but it hung in the air between them, unresolved. Pascal provided a buffer and a source of amusement, chattering throughout the day in Rebecca's mother's voice. The parrot seemed to have an uncanny sense of timing, often repeating phrases that were oddly appropriate to the moment. "Patience is a virtue," Pascal announced one evening when Vincent was struggling with a piece of harness that refused to mend properly, and Vincent had laughed so hard he had to set down his work. "Your mother was a wise woman," he said to Rebecca, shaking his head. "And this bird is either psychic or the world's greatest coincidence." As the days passed, Rebecca began to notice small things about her husband. The way he always made sure she had the shady seat when they sat on the porch in the evening. The way he brought her wildflowers when he came in from checking the cattle, presenting them shyly as if unsure of his welcome. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, asking questions and remembering details. And she began to notice the way her heart beat faster when he smiled at her, the way she looked forward to their evening conversations, the way she had started to think of him as Vincent instead of Mr. Marlowe, had started to think of this ranch as home instead of exile. One evening in late August, nearly a month after her arrival, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. Pascal dozed in his cage, making soft, sleepy sounds, and the air was finally beginning to cool after another scorching day. "Rebecca," Vincent said quietly, and something in his tone made her turn to look at him. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." Her heart began to pound, but she kept her voice steady. "All right. Are you happy here?" Not content, not making the best of things, but actually happy. He looked at her intently, his creek water eyes serious in the fading light. "Because I find that I care very much about your happiness, more than I expected to when I placed that advertisement for a wife. And if you are unhappy, I want to know how to fix it." Rebecca considered the question carefully, looking out over the prairie where she could see the dark shapes of cattle grazing peacefully. She thought about the month that had passed, about the satisfaction of watching her garden flourish, about the friendships beginning to form with Sarah Morrison and Mrs. Chen, about the quiet pleasure of sharing meals and conversation with this good, steady man. "I am happy," she said finally. "Happier than I have been in a very long time, perhaps happier than I ever expected to be again after my mother died." Vincent let out a breath she had not realized he was holding. "I am glad. I worry that I am not enough, that ranch life is too hard, too lonely." "It is hard work," Rebecca agreed. "But it is honest work, and there is satisfaction in that. And it is not lonely, not with you here." She felt her cheeks warm but pressed on, emboldened by the twilight and the honesty of the moment. "You have been very kind to me, Vincent, very patient. And I want you to know that I do not expect you to sleep on the floor forever. We are married, and I understand what that means." Vincent was very still beside her. "Rebecca, I do not want you to feel obligated. I know this was a business arrangement, a practical solution to both our problems. I do not expect you to pretend feelings you do not have." "Who says I would be pretending?" The words slipped out before Rebecca could stop them, and she felt her face flame, but she did not take them back because they were true. Somewhere in the past month, amid the shared work and quiet conversations and small kindnesses, she had begun to fall in love with her husband, Rebecca. Vincent turned to face her fully, taking her hand in both of his. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that when I agreed to marry you, I hoped for respect and security," Rebecca said, her heart hammering. "But I have found something more. I have found that I care for you, Vincent Marlowe, that I look forward to seeing you each morning, and that I miss you when you are out on the range. That I think about you far more than is probably sensible." "Trust your heart," Pascal said drowsily from his cage, and they both laughed, breaking the tension. "Your mother's timing is impeccable, even in Parrot form," Vincent said, and then his expression grew serious again. "Rebecca, I have been falling in love with you since the moment you stepped off that train with your Parrot and your courage and your honest eyes. I did not think it was possible to feel this way about someone I had known for such a short time, but every day I am more certain. You are everything I hoped for and so much more than I deserve." "Then why are we still sitting out here?" Rebecca asked, her voice shaking slightly with nerves and anticipation. "Why are we not acting like the married couple we are?" Vincent stood, pulling her gently to her feet. Because I wanted to be sure. Because I never want you to feel pressured or trapped. Because I respect you too much to assume." He cupped her face in his rough, gentle hands. "But if you are sure, if this is truly what you want, then I will stop sleeping on the floor and start being the husband you deserve in every way." "I am sure," Rebecca whispered. And when he kissed her this time, it was not the chaste brush of their wedding day but something deeper, something that spoke of promise and passion and the beginning of real intimacy. They went inside together, leaving Pascal covered and dozing on the porch, and Vincent closed the bedroom door behind them. Rebecca's hands shook as she began to unbutton her dress, but Vincent stilled her fingers with his own. "Let me," he said softly, and proceeded to undress her with a care and reverence that made her feel cherished rather than exposed. When she stood before him in just her chemise, he looked at her as if she were something precious, something miraculous. "You are so beautiful," he said roughly. "So brave and strong and beautiful." Rebecca helped him with his own clothes, learning the landscape of his body as he learned hers, and when they finally came together in the brass bed, it was with a tenderness and care that brought tears to her eyes. Vincent was patient and gentle, mindful of her inexperience, and if there was some pain, there was also wonder and connection and the sense that something profound had shifted between them. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, and Vincent stroked her hair while Rebecca traced patterns on his chest. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "None," she said firmly. "You?" "Only that I did not tell you how I felt sooner." He kissed her forehead. "I have wasted a month sleeping on the floor when I could have been holding you like this." "We had to be sure," Rebecca said. "We had to build trust first. My mother always said that passion without trust is just heat that burns out quickly. But passion built on trust and respect can last a lifetime." "Your mother was a very wise woman," Vincent said. "I wish I could have known her." "She would have liked you," Rebecca assured him. "She always said that character mattered more than charm, and you have character in abundance." They fell asleep entwined, and when Rebecca woke in the morning to find Vincent still beside her, his arm heavy and warm across her waist, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This was her husband, her partner, her home. The summer turned to autumn, and the work changed with the seasons. Vincent prepared for the fall cattle drive to market, and Rebecca helped by organizing supplies and mending gear. She had learned to ride, awkwardly at first but with increasing confidence, and she sometimes accompanied Vincent when he checked on the herd, enjoying the excuse to spend time together away from the demands of the ranch. Her garden produced abundantly, and she spent long days preserving the harvest, putting up jars of tomatoes and beans and pickles that would feed them through the winter. Sarah Morrison came to help, bringing her enormous energy and constant chatter, and the two women became close friends, sharing confidences and dreams while their hands worked steadily. "You are happy with him," Sarah observed one day, and it was not quite a question. "I am," Rebecca confirmed, smiling as she thought about the way Vincent had kissed her that morning before heading out to the range. "Very happy. I know it seems strange, a mail-order marriage turning into real love, but it has happened." "Not so strange," Sarah said. "My parents had an arranged marriage in Pennsylvania, and they loved each other deeply for 43 years. Love can grow from many beginnings." She looked wistful. "I am glad you have found it. Not everyone does." In late September, Vincent made the cattle drive to Omaha with Thomas Patterson and his sons, and Rebecca spent 5 anxious days managing the ranch alone. She tended the animals, maintained the garden, and tried not to worry about all the things that could go wrong on a cattle drive. Pascal kept her company, chattering in her mother's voice and providing a connection to both past and present. "He will come home safe," the parrot assured her one evening, and Rebecca had to laugh even as she blinked back tears. "I hope you are right," she whispered, stroking Pascal's green feathers. "I hope you are right." When Vincent returned, dusty and exhausted but grinning with the success of a good sail, Rebecca ran to meet him, not caring who might see. He caught her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing, and she thought her heart might burst from the joy of having him home. "I missed you terribly," she said against his neck. "Every minute you were gone." "I missed you too," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "The whole time, all I could think about was getting home to you. Patterson teased me mercilessly about being lovesick." "Are you lovesick?" Rebecca pulled back to look at his face. "Hopelessly," Vincent confirmed and kissed her thoroughly to prove it. The money from the cattle sale allowed them to make improvements to the ranch. Vincent bought more breeding stock and materials to expand the barn. Rebecca ordered seeds and tools for next year's garden, and also splurged on a few luxuries. Real curtain fabric, a set of good dishes, and a beautiful wooden rocking chair for the porch. As winter approached, they settled into the rhythm of married life with the ease of people who had been together for years rather than months. They worked side by side, planned together, dreamed together. On cold evenings, they sat by the fire, Rebecca mending or knitting while Vincent read aloud from one of her mother's books, and Pascal dozed on his perch nearby. It was during one such evening in early November that Rebecca realized she needed to tell Vincent her suspicion. She had been watching for her monthly courses and they had not come, not in October, and now November was nearly half gone. She felt different, too, a subtle shifting in her body, a tenderness in her breasts, and a new sensitivity to smells. "Vincent," she said, setting down her knitting. "I need to tell you something." He looked up from the book, immediately attentive to the seriousness in her tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine." Rebecca took a deep breath. "I think I might be expecting a child. I am not certain yet, but the signs are there." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, and she watched emotions flicker across his face. Surprise, wonder, joy, and something that might have been fear. Then he set down the book and came to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "A child," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "Our child. Are you pleased?" Rebecca asked, suddenly uncertain. They had not discussed children, had not talked about the future beyond the immediate needs of the ranch. "Pleased," Vincent laughed, and there were tears in his eyes. "Rebecca, I am beyond pleased. I am terrified and amazed and so happy I can barely speak. A child, a family. I never dared to hope for so much." Rebecca felt her own tears start, and she leaned forward to rest her forehead against his. "I am frightened too. My mother died when I was born, you know. There were complications, and she was never strong after that. I am afraid of what might happen." "We will get you the best care," Vincent promised fiercely. "Mrs. Morrison has had 5 healthy babies, and there is a doctor in Council Bluffs now, Dr. Anderson. We will do everything right and you will be fine. You and our baby will both be fine." "Children are a blessing," Pascal announced from his cage, and they both laughed through their tears. "Yes, they are," Vincent agreed and pulled Rebecca into his arms. "The greatest blessing I could imagine." Winter came to Iowa with cold winds and occasional snow, and Rebecca marveled at how different the prairie looked dressed in white. She continued to work as much as she could, though Vincent fussed over her constantly, trying to prevent her from lifting anything heavy or working too hard. She tolerated his concern with amused patience, knowing it came from love rather than a desire to control. Mrs. Chen visited regularly, bringing herbal teas that she promised would ease nausea and strengthen Rebecca's body for the birth. Sarah Morrison came too, full of advice and encouragement. sharing the practical wisdom of a woman who had done this 5 times before. "The first one is the scariest," Sarah confided one snowy afternoon as they sat by the fire. "But your body knows what to do, and you are strong, Rebecca. I can see it in you. You will do just fine." Rebecca hoped she was right. As her belly began to swell with the growing child, she felt both awed and anxious about what was to come. She talked to the baby, sang to it, and read to it from her mother's books. Pascal often joined in, repeating phrases in her mother's voice, and Rebecca took comfort in the connection across generations, mother to daughter to grandchild. Christmas came, and Vincent surprised her by making a special trip to town to buy gifts. A bolt of soft white flannel for baby clothes, a new book of poetry, and a delicate silver necklace with a small locket. "For a picture of our child," he explained, fastening it around her neck. "When he or she arrives." Rebecca gave him socks she had knitted, a new work shirt she had sewn, and a leather-bound journal. "For recording the ranch business," she said, "and also for writing down your thoughts and dreams." "I have been reading my mother's journals, the ones I brought from Boston, and it has meant so much to hear her voice, to know her mind. I want our child to have that from both of us." They spent a quiet Christmas day at home, just the two of them and Pascal, and it was one of the happiest days of Rebecca's life. They cooked a special meal together, opened their gifts, and talked about the year ahead, about the baby who would arrive in the spring and the dreams they had for their growing family. "I want our children to know they are loved," Vincent said as they sat together in the rocking chair, Rebecca on his lap despite her growing belly. "I want them to feel safe and valued and free to become whoever they are meant to be." "They will," Rebecca promised. "Because they have you as a father, because they have us." The winter passed slowly, and Rebecca grew larger and more uncomfortable as the baby developed. By March, she could barely see her feet, and getting out of bed required strategic planning and usually Vincent's help. But she glowed with health and happiness, and Dr. Anderson, who examined her during a rare trip to town, pronounced her and the baby perfectly fit. "Probably another month," he estimated, "maybe a bit longer. First babies often take their time." Rebecca spent the last weeks preparing for the birth, washing and folding the tiny clothes she had sewn, arranging the cradle that Vincent had built with his own hands. Sarah Morrison had promised to come stay when Rebecca's time drew near, and Mrs. Chen had supplied a collection of herbs and tinctures for pain management and healing. The baby came on a warm April night, arriving with the spring rains that turned the prairie green and filled the creeks to bursting. Rebecca's labor started in the afternoon with mild cramping that gradually intensified. Vincent sent word to Sarah and Mrs. Chen, and by evening, both women were there, taking charge with the calm competence of experience. Vincent was banished to the main room, where he paced and worried and jumped at every sound from the bedroom. Pascal kept him company, occasionally offering encouragement in Rebecca's mother's voice. "Be brave, child," the parrot said. "Courage conquers all." Vincent tried to take comfort in the words, but as the hours passed and Rebecca's cries of pain grew louder, he felt helpless and terrified. This was the one thing he could not protect her from, could not fix or make better. He could only wait and pray and hope that both Rebecca and the baby would survive. Finally, as dawn light began to creep through the windows, he heard a new sound, the thin, outraged wail of a newborn baby. Vincent's heart stopped, then started again at double speed. He waited, agonizing, until Sarah Morrison opened the bedroom door, her face tired but wreathed in smiles. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy, strong boy with good lungs, and Rebecca did beautifully. She is tired but well." Vincent pushed past her into the bedroom where Mrs. Chen was cleaning up and Rebecca lay in the bed, pale and exhausted but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in white flannel, and when Vincent approached, Rebecca turned the blanket back to reveal a red-faced, squalling infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Our son," she said softly. "Vincent, look at him. He is perfect." Vincent sank down on the edge of the bed, staring at this miracle they had created. The baby's eyes were squeezed shut, his tiny fists waving in indignation at being born, and Vincent felt his throat close with emotion. "He is perfect," he agreed roughly, "and you are amazing. Rebecca, you were so brave." "I had help," Rebecca said, smiling at Sarah and Mrs. Chen. "Good help." "What will you name him?" Sarah asked, coming to admire the baby. Rebecca and Vincent exchanged glances, having discussed this many times over the winter. "We thought Victor," Rebecca said. "Victor Matthew Marlowe. Victor for Vincent and Matthew because it means gift of God." "A good, strong name," Mrs. Chen approved. "He will be good boy, I think." Born with the spring, new life coming to world. Victor Matthew Marlowe made his opinions known loudly and frequently over the following weeks. He was a hungry baby, demanding to be fed at all hours, and Rebecca spent most of her time nursing him or walking him, or simply staring at him in wonder. Vincent was besotted, amazed that he had helped create this tiny person, and he took over all the household chores so Rebecca could focus on the baby. Pascal was fascinated by the new addition and often perched on the edge of the cradle, talking to Victor in Rebecca's mother's voice. "Sweet child," the parrot would croon, "precious baby, you are so loved." As spring turned to summer, Rebecca regained her strength and energy, and they settled into a new rhythm that included a baby. Vincent built a sling that allowed Rebecca to carry Victor while she worked in the garden, and the baby seemed content to nap against his mother's chest while she weeded and harvested. They had help and visitors constantly. Sarah Morrison brought her boys to meet the new baby, and they were surprisingly gentle with the infant, taking turns holding him and making him smile. Mrs. Chen brought gifts of tiny silk shoes and herbs to help Rebecca's milk production. Thomas Patterson and his sons stopped by to congratulate Vincent and tease him about sleepless nights. The ranch thrived. The cattle herd grew, the garden produced abundantly, and Vincent's reputation as an honest, hard-working rancher spread throughout the region. He was asked to join the local cattlemen's association, and Rebecca encouraged him to accept, knowing the connections would be valuable for their future. When Victor was 6 months old, sitting up and starting to babble, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was less surprising but no less joyful. They wanted a large family, had talked about it often, and the thought of another baby was welcome. "Irish twins," Sarah Morrison said with a laugh when Rebecca told her. "That is what they call babies born less than a year apart." "You will have your hands very full, my friend." "I do not mind," Rebecca said, watching Vincent play with Victor on a blanket spread on the porch. "I always wanted siblings when I was growing up, but my mother could not have more children after me. I want my children to have brothers and sisters, to have family." The second baby, a girl they named Rose, arrived the following spring on a mild May morning. Her birth was easier than Victor's, quicker and less frightening, and Rebecca recovered rapidly. Rose had her father's creek water eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she was a placid, easy baby who seemed content to observe the world with calm interest. Victor, just over a year old and walking with wobbly determination, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would bring her his toys, patting her gently and saying "baby" with great pride. Pascal, now an established member of the family, added Sweet Rose to his vocabulary and would often sing nonsense songs to the baby in Rebecca's mother's voice. The years that followed were busy and full and so rich with love that Rebecca sometimes had to pause in her work, just to marvel at the life she had built. They added 2 more children to their family. Another boy, Thomas, named for Thomas Patterson, and finally a second daughter, Grace, who arrived when Rebecca was 30 and who they decided would be their last. The ranch grew prosperous. Vincent's hard work and honest dealings earned him respect throughout the region, and he was eventually elected president of the Cattlemen's Association. Rebecca became known for her garden and her preserves, which she sold in town for extra income. She also taught reading and arithmetic to the ranch children in the area, holding classes in their main room during the winter months when outdoor work was limited. Their house expanded too. Vincent added 2 more rooms, giving the children their own space and also creating a small library where Rebecca's mother's books held pride of place. He built a larger barn and a proper chicken coop, and he fenced more land for pasture. The community around them flourished as well. More families moved to the area, drawn by the good land and the promise of prosperity. A school was built in Council Bluffs, and eventually a new church with a permanent preacher. There were regular social gatherings, barn dances and church picnics and quilting bees, and Rebecca found herself at the center of a network of strong, capable women who supported each other through the challenges of frontier life. Through it all, Pascal remained a constant presence, a living link to Rebecca's mother and her Boston past. The Parrot's vocabulary never changed, frozen in time with the phrases Rebecca's mother had taught him, but those words continued to offer wisdom and comfort at unexpected moments. When Victor was struggling with his reading lessons and ready to give up, Pascal would announce, "Patience and practice make perfect." When Rose was frightened of a thunderstorm, the Parrot would say soothingly, "Courage, child, this too shall pass." And when Rebecca and Vincent sat together on the porch after long days of work, watching their children play in the yard, Pascal would often say, "Trust your heart," reminding them of how this whole beautiful life had begun. One evening, when Rebecca was 35 and their youngest, Grace, was 5 years old, they sat on that same porch watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar shades of gold and rose. The children were playing a complicated game that involved a great deal of running and shouting, and Pascal dozed in his cage, now showing his age with faded feathers and slower movements. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked, taking Rebecca's hand. "Leaving Boston, marrying a stranger, building a life out here in the middle of nowhere?" Rebecca considered the question, looking at the house they had built together, the land they had tended, the children they had raised. She thought about the frightened, desperate young woman who had stepped off the train in Council Bluffs 13 years earlier, carrying all her worldly possessions in a carpet bag and a parrot cage. "Not for a single moment," she said honestly. "This life, this family, it is everything I could have hoped for and so much more. I was so lost when I came here, so afraid and alone. And you gave me a home, Vincent. You gave me love and purpose and these beautiful children. How could I ever regret that?" "I am the one who received the gift," Vincent said, raising her hand to his lips. "You could have married any number of men from those advertisements, but you chose me, and you have made my life infinitely richer. I love you, Rebecca Marlowe. I have loved you since the moment you stepped off that train with your courage and your parrot, and I will love you until the day I die. Trust your heart," Pascal murmured from his cage, and they both smiled. "Your mother knew what she was talking about," Vincent said. "She usually did," Rebecca agreed, leaning her head on her husband's shoulder. "She would have loved all of this, loved seeing what we built together. Sometimes I imagine her here, watching the children grow, working in the garden with me, and Pascal helps keep her close." "I am glad you brought him," Vincent said, as he had said many times over the years. "I am glad you never let me hush him, never asked him to be quiet or sent him away. His voice, your mother's voice, has been a blessing to our family." As if in response, Pascal opened one eye and regarded them with the knowing look that parrots sometimes have. "Love conquers all," the bird said clearly, and then tucked his head back under his wing. The children ran up to the porch, breathless and laughing, demanding water and attention. Victor, now 13 and nearly as tall as his father, scooped up 5-year-old Grace and swung her around, making her shriek with delight. Rose, 11 and serious, scolded them both for being too rough. Thomas, 8 and already obsessed with cattle and horses, climbed into Rebecca's lap despite being far too big for it. Vincent looked at his family, at the chaos and noise and love that filled his porch and his life, and felt his heart swell with gratitude. He had started as a lonely cowboy working someone else's land, dreaming of a future that seemed impossibly distant. And now here he was, surrounded by everything that mattered, everything he had ever wanted. "I love you all," he said, and was immediately tackled by children demanding hugs and proclaiming their own love in return. Rebecca watched her husband disappear under a pile of children and felt tears of joy prick her eyes. This was happiness, she thought. This moment, this family, this life they had built from faith and hope and a willingness to trust their hearts. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of challenges and changes. There were harsh winters and drought summers, years when the cattle prices were good and years when they barely broke even. But through it all, Rebecca and Vincent remained steady partners, supporting each other through difficulties and celebrating triumphs together. Pascal lived to the remarkable age of 32, an old parrot indeed, and when he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep, the entire family mourned. They buried him beneath the rose bushes that Rebecca had nursed back to health so many years ago, and Vincent carved a small wooden marker that read, "Pascal, beloved companion, keeper of memories and wisdom." "He was my last link to Mama," Rebecca said as they stood by the grave, and Vincent pulled her close. "No," he said gently. "You carry your mother in yourself in the way you love our children and teach them to be brave and kind. You carry her in the garden you tend and the home you have made. Pascal was a reminder, but you are the living legacy." The children grew and changed. Victor became a skilled rancher, working alongside his father and eventually taking over more of the day-to-day operations. At 20, he married a sweet girl named Anna from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the southern portion of the Marlowe land, keeping the ranch in the family. Rose, serious and studious, became a teacher, taking over the school in Council Bluffs and earning a reputation for excellence. She married at 23 to a banker named William, and they settled in town, giving Rebecca and Vincent their first grandchildren. Thomas, born with wanderlust in his veins, went west to Wyoming to work on the great cattle ranches there, sending letters full of adventure and promising to visit often. And Grace, the baby, surprised them all by declaring her intention to become a doctor. With Vincent and Rebecca's full support, she went east to study medicine, one of the first women in her class. Through all these changes, Rebecca and Vincent remained each other's constant. They grew older together, their hair turning gray and their faces lined with the evidence of years spent squinting into the prairie sun. But their love deepened rather than faded, tempered by time and experience into something unshakable. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. The house and yard were filled with people, children and grandchildren, neighbors and friends, people whose lives had been touched by the Marlowe's kindness and generosity over the years. Sarah Morrison, now a grandmother herself, stood to make a toast. "I remember when Rebecca first arrived," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "A scared young woman from Boston who had never seen a cow up close, married to a man she had known for less than a day. And I remember thinking how brave she was, how brave they both were, to take such a leap of faith. But what I did not realize then was that bravery was just the beginning. Over the years, I have watched them build something extraordinary, not just a successful ranch but a true partnership, a genuine love. They have shown all of us what marriage can be when two people commit to growing together, to supporting each other's dreams, to putting in the hard work that love requires. So, I raise my glass to Vincent and Rebecca Marlowe. May they have many more years of health and happiness together." The crowd echoed the toast, and Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face. Vincent pulled her close, kissing her temple. "She is right, you know," he murmured. "We have built something extraordinary." "We have," Rebecca agreed. "And it started with a parrot and a promise and the willingness to trust our hearts." That night, after the guests had gone and the house was quiet, they sat together in the rocking chair on the porch, as they had done thousands of times before. The summer air was warm and sweet, filled with the scent of Rebecca's roses and the distant sound of cattle lowing. "Do you remember the first night I arrived?" Rebecca asked. "When we sat right here and talked until the sun set?" "I remember everything about that day," Vincent said. "The way you looked with your bonnet slightly crooked and determination in your eyes. The way Pascal said trust your heart, and I thought it was the best advice I had ever heard. The way I knew, even then, that you were going to change my life." "I was so frightened," Rebecca confessed. "I had no idea if I was making the right choice, if you would be kind or cruel, if I would survive the first year. But then, you looked at Pascal with curiosity instead of annoyance, and you promised never to raise your hand to me in anger, and something in me relaxed. I knew I had made the right choice." "We both did," Vincent said. "We chose each other, and we chose to build something good together. And look at what we have created. Children who are thriving, a ranch that will continue for generations, a community we are proud to be part of." "We chose well, Rebecca." She turned in his arms to kiss him, this man who had been her husband for 25 years, her partner in every sense of the word. The kiss was sweet and familiar, flavored with decades of shared mornings and whispered conversations and laughter in the dark. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I will love you always." "And I love you," Vincent replied, "more with each passing year." They sat together as the stars came out one by one until the prairie sky was thick with them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and the wind rustled through the grass with a sound like whispered secrets. This was their land, their home, their life, built from nothing but faith and work and love. And if sometimes Rebecca imagined, she heard a parrot's voice on the wind, saying "trust your heart" in her mother's precise Boston accent, she chose to believe it was a blessing from beyond, an approval of the life she had built and the love she had found. The Marlowe ranch continued to prosper for many more years. Vincent and Rebecca lived to see their grandchildren grow, and even met a few great-grandchildren before they passed, within months of each other, both in their 80s. They died as they had lived for half a century. Together, their hands clasped, their love as strong at the end as it had been in the beginning. The ranch passed to Victor and Anna, and then to their children, and the Marlowe name became synonymous with integrity and hard work throughout Iowa. But the real legacy that Vincent and Rebecca left was not the land or the cattle or the house. It was the example of what two people could build when they chose to trust their hearts, to work together, to love without reservation. And in the family Bible, passed down through generations, There was an entry in Rebecca's careful hand, written on their 50th anniversary. On this day, I give thanks for the parrot who spoke my mother's words, for the cowboy who never hushed it, and for the love that grew from such unlikely beginnings. Trust your heart, my mother taught me, and I did, and it led me home. Years later, when Rose's granddaughter was cleaning out the attic of the old ranch house, she found a small brass cage, tarnished with age but still beautiful. Inside was a faded photograph of a green parrot, and on the back, someone had written, "Pascal, who brought wisdom and love to our family, may we always remember to trust our hearts." She brought the cage and the photograph downstairs to show her great-grandmother Rose, now elderly herself, but still sharp and full of stories. "Tell me about Pascal," the girl asked. "Tell me about Grandma Rebecca and Grandpa Vincent." And Rose smiled, settling into her chair with the photograph in her hands, and began to tell the story of a mail-order bride who brought a parrot to Iowa, and a cowboy who understood that some voices should never be hushed, and the great love that grew between them across the years. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations. Because it was a story about courage and second chances, about listening to wisdom wherever it came from, about building a life on love and respect and hard work. It was a story about trusting your heart, even when the future was uncertain, even when fear threatened to overwhelm hope. It was, in short, a true love story, the kind that lasts forever.